If you look at the towering figures of 20th century music, starting with the faces on the cover of Sgt. Pepper, or watch Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page perform under symbols he famously inscribed on his own albums, or analyze David Bowie's mid-70s lyrics about the Golden Dawn, you see a common thread connecting these icons to the architects of modern witchcraft. That thread is Aleister Crowley, a Victorian poet and mountaineer who experimented with heroin and was routinely denounced by the press as the wickedest man in the world. Crowley began his journey in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, but he quickly grew frustrated with their obsession with secret grades and oaths. In 1909, he broke silence by publishing the order's private rituals in his periodical, The Equinox, stripping away the gatekeeping that had defined 19th century occultism. This wasn't a simple act of spite. Crowley wanted to replace old-world elitism with a modern, individualized framework, a project that eventually changed the 20th century in 5 distinct ways. The first major shift occurred in Cairo in 1904. During his honeymoon, Crowley claimed to have received a dictated text from a supernatural entity named Aiwass. He titled it The Book of the Law. This text introduced the philosophy of Thelema. Its central mandate, do what thou wilt, is often misread as an invitation to chaos. In practice, Crowley defined it as the obligation to discover one's true will, an individual's absolute inherent purpose in the universe. He sought to achieve this through a system called Magick, adding the K to align it with scientific inquiry. He required meticulous record-keeping, instructing students to maintain detailed magical diaries and apply psychological skepticism to every ritual vision. By combining the method of science with the aim of religion, Crowley replaced the vague traditions of the past with a documented curriculum centered on personal experimentation. Crowley's obsession with the mind's limits led him to explore psychoactive drugs decades before the 1960s counterculture popularized them. He treated substances like hashish and peyote as calculated technologies. As highlighted in modern academic research, Crowley used these to induce reproducible states of consciousness that he then analyzed through his ritual system. This structured approach to the mystical reached a new generation in the 1950s, specifically Gerald Gardner, the man credited with starting the modern Wiccan movement. Gardner was a member of Crowley's magical orders and drew heavily from the occultist's rituals and rhythmic poetry to construct the foundational texts of Wicca. Crowley's writings provided a formalized syntax for the movement, allowing Gardner to synthesize disparate folk practices into the cohesive religious structure we recognize today. By the late 1960s, Crowley's rejection of Victorian constraints made him a patron saint for the burgeoning youth counterculture. His aesthetic of radical individualism infiltrated the mainstream when the Beatles included him among the stoned visionaries on the cover of Sgt. Pepper. Heavy metal later adopted his dark persona as a badge of honor. Jimmy Page went as far as purchasing Boleskine House, Crowley's former home on Loch Ness, to house his massive collection of the occultist writings. From Ozzy Osbourne's direct musical tributes to Jim Morrison's exploration of Thelemic themes, Crowley's dark persona became a central myth for rock and roll. His lifelong pursuit of total personal freedom anticipated the desires of the mid-century, arming the largest cultural rebellion in modern history with its core ethos. Because of Crowley, the occult moved out of the clandestine fringes. It became a structured framework that is now deeply embedded in mainstream art and modern spirituality. Today, whether you are listening to classic rock, exploring modern mindfulness, or reading tarot cards, you are standing in the shadow of the great beast. Ultimately, he proved that the most enduring magical act is the total and unapologetic liberation of the self.